Good morning. It is Friday, the 27th of February. I'm Maeve McMahon, and this is Europe Today, your daily dose of European news and analysis, live here on Euronews. Coming up, Viktor Orban has sent a letter to Brussels. The Hungarian Prime Minister has told EU Council President Antonio Costa that he understands he caused, quote, political difficulties this week when he vetoed a €90 billion loan for Ukraine. He says he's open to, quote, finding practical solutions. Hungary wants the EU to send a fact-finding mission to the Druzhba pipeline at the centre of a political storm. For more on this moving story, I'm joined here in the studio by our EU News editor, Maria Tadeo. So tell us about this letter.
Good morning. Yes, it is a letter that adds some nuance now to the spat, of course, which is now escalating in European politics. Yesterday in public, Prime Minister Orban, in the context, of course, of an election, it's important to remember the Hungarians were held to the polls in April, once again attacked President Zelensky, saying that he is flat out lying, that the pipeline is not broken, that as a result of the halt in transit, that means that energy prices could go up and the Hungarian people will be punished for it. Of course, he also said that he is going to reinforce security around strategic assets. We should note that Ukraine has not attacked Hungary directly or indirectly, even during the war. But of course, all of this is being played up in the context of this election. Having said that, behind the scenes, Orban did send a letter to Antonio Costa, which we have here, in which he acknowledges, as you said, that this Hungarian double veto has created political difficulties for the EU. Remember, there is a sanctions package against Russia at play, but also a loan to which Hungary will not participate and has no financial obligation to, that is being blocked by Budapest too. So in this letter, he says Hungary is ready to constructively engage in all efforts to return the transfer of oil to Budapest. He also says that Hungary supports the idea of a fact-finding mission. This is not surprising because, of course, Euronews this week we reported that this was an idea floated already on the Monday, that inspectors could go on site just to check out and figure out what's going on with this pipeline. The Hungarians suggest that experts that are delegated, so vetoed in some way by Slovakia and Hungary, could go and see exactly what is the status of the Druzhba pipeline. It seems like a possible solution, but I should note that the Ukrainians were not very keen at the start of this week. They said they needed to ask for permission. Certainly, the Ukrainian foreign minister told that in a meeting on Monday. And of course, this is an active war zone. It's not clear that Ukraine would allow this immediately, considering obviously the complexities and the complications on the ground.
So, okay, but then what, Maria?
Well, that's a very good question. Well, there's two focus points at this point. One is to look at the alternatives, and Croatia is emerging as a big player. Obviously, it's a big business opportunity for the country, the transport of oil. The Croatian operator Janav said this week that it has capacity to supply both Hungary and Slovakia. They also say that 7 tankers will get to Hungary by the end of April, but there is a catch. All of this is non-Russian oil. And for the Hungarians, that's a problem because they won't pay the price they pay for Russian oil, which is cheaper to some of the alternatives in the market. At this point, the Croatians, they say they need to figure out whether or not they can carry even Russian oil because there are sanctions in place from both the EU and the US. The other point perhaps is money. The Hungarians have applied for a loan for defense to the EU. Most of the funding is frozen, of course, because of the issues over rule of law. So perhaps if they get an indication that money could flow, they could step back from this maximalist position.
Okay, Maria, you mentioned as well Croatia. You'll have an exclusive interview with the Prime Minister Plenković right here on Europe Today on Monday, so stay tuned for that. Maria, thank you so much for those details. Well, this Hungarian veto and, of course, the ongoing war in Ukraine is making EU leaders nervous this week, especially given the full-scale war has now entered its 5th year. For The View from Estonia, a country that borders Russia, I sat down with Prime Minister Christian Michal, a fluent Russian speaker. I started by asking him why Vladimir Putin was agreeing to peace talks while bombing civilian infrastructure in Ukraine.
It's like riding a bike, being a dictator, that when you stop, you will fall over. That is the same with Vladimir Putin. For example, everybody in Europe, and I always remind my colleagues that right now Putin has more men under the arms than at the start of the war. If we would stop right now, and he would stop right now killing women and children in Ukraine, then what to do with those guys? They need medical assistance, but they have to glorify as hero in Russia. And they will come all over the Europe and so on. So we will have everybody problems in Russia and also domestic security problems.
And the Americans, of course, are leading these peace talks. Do you think they're mindful of the fact that Ukraine cannot budge on their red lines?
It used to be like a 28 points plan to the Thanksgiving. Right now it's something all different already. Europe stepping up, having 90 billions funding Ukraine, changed the game.
But we don't have 90 billions. It's frozen.
We will have, because meeting Ursula von der Leyen and Antonio Costa, they have different plans how to deliver the money. And just in Kiev, they also said that they have plans. So
what are these plans?
They will tell.
Are they going to work?
I hope so. Because to be honest, if Europe cannot make this kind of big decisions which affect our security, then probably there will be many discussions about how Europe will decide things altogether. Will there be some kind of enhanced cooperation, how it will go?
But are we on plan C now? Because, of course, we spent months talking as well about the frozen Russian assets. They're off the table now. The Belgians have said so.
So and so, because they are not off the table, they are still frozen, which is a good thing, because I can remember back each 6 months we had to roll over the sanctions, say, keep them frozen. But right now they're frozen permanently, which is a good thing. But we need to deliver this 90 billion we decided. And to be honest, we decided everybody was in this room. Orban was in this room, Fico was in this room, Babiš was in this room. They decided to opt out, but we still decided.
So do you feel they're traitors? Well, Hungary's traitor for doing this?
For a long time, I don't understand Viktor Orban's position, but he exactly knows that nobody understands his position to have this kind of idea that we should ask for European security from a dictator from Russia.
And are you being tough enough on him in these meetings?
Everybody's been tough enough on him in this meeting and outside these meetings.
But going forward, how do you deal with these vetoes in the future?
We'll see how it goes, because I have the feeling there's probably a couple of lines everybody's right now waiting in Europe. The first one is how Hungarian elections will go. Everybody knows that that can be a game changer. And the second thing is that there's also different kind of talks of how to change the deciding mechanisms. Because, for example, on the economy side, Mario Draghi and his report said that we need more central deciding, more federalization. But on the security side, maybe some kind of enhanced cooperation to pull in Norway, UK, Canada, Iceland, these kind of countries which we need.
One final question on the transatlantic bond, which is, of course, very important for both Brussels and DC, but it's going through a bit of a rift. How bad is it?
Tough to say, because on the one side, which Trump had the message that Europe should invest more in security, because Europe is very free and wealthy neighborhood. And that's to my liking, to be honest, not the wording, but also the message that we should be able to keep ourselves the way we like it. Estonia is behaving accordingly, because we have this year, we have our defense expenditure 5.4% of GDP. This is very tough thing to achieve. This is not easy. But at the same time, I know that my grandchildren will live in peace, because our neighbor knows that we take ourselves also seriously. So if whole Europe would behave this way, I would say that we are better off in 5, 7, 10 years. But at the same time, the rhetorics that Europe is decaying, old and so, and not free, this is not serious, because if you look at different indexes, we are among the freest nations in the world.
Estonian Prime Minister Christian Michal there. And the ongoing war in Ukraine and the spat over the Druzhba pipeline is also under discussion over at NATO this week. Secretary-General Mark Rutte has welcomed a number of leaders, including the Lithuanian Prime Minister Inga Ruganiene. Our correspondent Shona Murray reports from NATO.
Well, Maeve, just as the dust has been relatively settling here at NATO in relation to Donald Trump's claims last month that he was going to take over Greenland, a new fissure has emerged, as we've seen Viktor Orban, the Hungarian Prime Minister, saying he's going to block a €90 billion loan for Ukraine, a considerable amount of which was going to be spent on military support. And I caught up with Lithuania's Prime Minister, Lithuania, of course, a frontline state in all this war, Inga Ruganiene, and I asked her about this situation.
When you live, now in a border of European Union, when you faced off every day with the threats, different kind of threats from balloons and other things, when you're fighting for the security, not just for Lithuania, but for whole Europe, to hear such words and decisions, it's nonsense. So we are worrying about it, and I am speaking about that in different levels in European Union, that it is unacceptable. And the European Union can be strong if we can have a strong one voice. So we have to have ability to have common decision in very strategic questions.
When you say it's nonsense, are you saying the whole point that Orban is making, that Ukraine is blocking Hungary's access to the Druzhba pipeline? We know that Russia bombed the pipeline. Are you saying it's nonsense, his claims that Ukraine isn't fixing it, isn't bothered to fix it?
It's almost yes. And, for me, I don't understand that the person thinks that if the war will start in NATO area in European Union, he thinks that it will not comes to Hungary. I think it is it is quite silly thinking.
So you think basically, Hungary is being naive here if the Hungarian government believes that this war can't go to Hungary because it can?
If Russia will put a step into European Union, they will go further. And we as Lithuania, we have a big experience about Soviet Union times. We know how you feel when Russia comes to your land. We know how the life is going on. That's why for us it's very sensitive questions. That's why we as Lithuania invest a lot into defense. So this year we have 5.38% of GDP investments into defense. It is a huge amount. It is almost 25% of whole our budget, because we understand that we don't want to come back to that times, to that experience which we had in the past.
Given the context of, let's say, slow Europe, a non-unified Europe, blockages by Hungary, and the United States no longer supporting Ukraine militarily, does Europe have the capabilities to defend itself for a few years until it rebuilds that?
I think we have to work for the situation that we have a very strong NATO alliance. And we have to do everything to build a very strong relationship between America and European Union. This is our top priority. Of course, we can speak about the worst plan, what it should be, but the first top priority should be strength relationship between transatlantic relationship. But by the same time, we have to work with Europe, within European Union, and strong unity. One voice is crucial today. So it should be working in both ways.
Shona Murray reporting for us there. Now, moving on, in other news, the European Commission has endorsed a citizens' initiative that aspires to guarantee access to safe abortion for every woman in Europe. Brussels says EU members may use EU funds voluntarily to finance safe abortions, but fell short of ensuring access across the EU. The campaign did manage, though, to clinch over 1 million endorsements and the nod from the European Parliament. Jakub Janis fills us in.
Over 1 million signatures are quite a number. And the My Voice, My Choice campaign recently collected them to ask the European Commission for EU money for accessing safe abortions in other member states. And responding to this European Citizens' Initiative yesterday, the European Commission noted that health policy is a national matter and there will be no extra money allocated. However, and that's new, the member states can voluntarily use existing EU money to cover the costs. But wait a second, what is this European initiative about? Let's take a look. This democratic tool allows everyday citizens to formally ask the EU to propose new laws, no matter where they stand politically. However, to succeed, an initiative needs at least 1 million valid signatures from a minimum of 7 member states. And for the My Voice, My Choice campaign, organizers got over 1 million verified signatures from 19 different countries. And among them were Hungary, Malta and Poland, so countries with highly restrictive abortion policies. Then, the European Parliament must discuss the proposal, and following that debate, the European Commission is legally bound to respond. And it has then 2 choices: either propose a new law, or publicly explain why it will not do it. So is that initiative actually useful? The answer is yes, but it's not a magic wand. Campaigns like Right to Water have genuinely resulted in revised EU laws, improving drinking water standards. Yet only 14 campaigns, or about 1 in 10, have ever gathered the required signatures. And even then, success isn't guaranteed, as the Commission always retains the right to refuse new legislation. So, my dear viewers, if you are passionate about an issue, start collecting your million signatures. And maybe set up your own lobbying group just in case.
And for more on this story that has gained huge traction on and offline, we're joined now here in the studio by Austria's Minister for Women, Science and Research, Eva Maria Holzleitner. Good morning. Welcome to Europe Today. Quite an achievement there, 1 million signatures. What's the view from Austria here?
1.2 citizens signed the initiative, and it's a very important one, My Voice, My Choice, because in my point of view, women's rights are a unique selling point of the European Union. It's one of our huge differences to other global parts of the world, and so to strengthen women's rights is very important for us, for our democracy within the European Union.
And this campaign argued that 20 million women currently do not have access to funding for a safe abortion. Do you think a more harmonised look at this in the 27 EU states could be a good idea?
We know that health issues are always very important for European citizens when we look at surveys, for example. So it is a first step, the answer of the Commission. But in the future, maybe we can take a lot more steps towards saving and supporting women's rights in the European Union. And yes, the access to abortion is one of the fundamentals, most fundamental women's rights.
And in Austria, you've declared war on violence against women and girls. How are you implementing your plan in a world run by men?
We have a national action plan against violence against women and girls, and every ministry in Austria supports this national action plan, and we worked together. So also the Ministry for Interior, for example, the Ministry for Education, also the male colleagues support this national action plan, and I think this is very important because we also need men's support for women's rights.
And of course, Women's Day coming up very soon. And just a final point on attracting scientists to the European Union and to Austria, this Choose Europe slogan. Is it working? Because, of course, a lot of scientists are leaving Trump's America currently.
On the one hand, it's a very sad issue that researchers have to leave their research institutions, for example. But on the other hand, as Europe, we need to be attractive. We need to still be a safe haven for science and research. And so Austria supported the Choose Europe for Science initiative. We started at a very early stage, a joint attractivity effort, and already 50 researchers came or are actually at the moment coming to Austria because we know that free science and research is a fundamental base of our democracy. And when researchers are threatened, democracy erodes. So it's very important to support also free science and research.
And of course, then to get from the lab to the market. Minister, thank you so much for being our guest this morning here on Europe Today.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for watching. That does bring this edition of Europe Today to an end. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back on Monday morning with an exclusive interview with the Croatian Prime Minister Plenković. So do tune in for that. For now, though, take care and see you very soon on Euronews.